Hello. Sorry I'm late. Is everybody here? Is anybody here? I can't hear you. But my name is Jewel Janata. I was many years ago an assistant editor on Moonlighting. Um, it was, bring them. What does that say? Is that good? Hey. Okay, are we set? Okay. Um, I think that's a yes. Hey. Hi. Yay! All right, I'm going to go ahead. Um, so, thank you all for inviting me, and thank you so much for having this group. I only discovered it recently, and wish I had discovered it so many years ago, because you all are experts in moonlighting, much more than I am. I'm so impressed with how you can remember everything about everything, and I keep I remember what things happened, and I forget what was the name of the show. So it was a long time ago. So I was on season 2 and season 3. I was brought on by Chris Welch, who I had worked with on a previous show, a previous TV show, syndicated TV show. But I was doing independent features, and I I really was trying to find really great people to learn from, and I hit the jackpot over and over and over again. So Chris Welch brought me on. It was my first union show. So I had been working a long time since I was 17, but it was my first, big studio show. And, and, and it went really fast, really, really fast, much faster than indie films. So, and then it turns out, back in the day when I talked to my editor friends who were working on shows, they liked being on television shows because they would come in at 9 and leave at 6, and they were off every weekend, and they got to have a work-life balance. And Moonlighting, and at the same time, Miami Vice were the first shows to make shows like they were feature films, and with the kind of camera work, with the amount of footage. Our I know you've heard this one before. Our scripts were 2 pages per minute, so they were 90 minutes or more, 90 pages or more. And because Glenn wanted that patter of the 1930s shows, which I love. I love dramatic comedy, love it, my favorite. And this was done just so remarkably well. So let's see. So skipping ahead, what I'm doing now is I am doing feature films. I'm doing narrative fiction films and feature documentaries, and I've won 2 Emmys, which is awesome. Editors Guild and Producers Guild and Alliance of Women Directors. And at the Producers Guild also, I was for a time, for about 5 years, I ran the program to train younger producers. And it, that we would pick people who were very, very diverse in all different ways, and people would come in from around the world, and that was really exciting. They do it a different way now, but that's okay. So I've been pushing a lot for diversity and inclusion in media, and that includes diversity of style, and the thing that blows me away is that I think Moonlighting really holds up. I remember when we were making it, I thought they were cutting so fast, and that no one would catch it. And it was much faster than anybody else was cutting. And now it's what everybody's still doing. So the world caught up with us, which I think is super cool. So mostly I produce, edit, sometimes direct. I have 2 Emmy Awards, which is very exciting. So much of what I'm going to talk about is really about how I was still launching my career and learning, learning not just how they did it at the studios, but Moonlighting had its own schedule. It had its own life, and we were making up as we went along. So now Chris Welch, who had done, he had a long career as a sound editor, and he was the supervising sound editor on the pilot of Moonlighting, and was brought on as a picture editor, but then he would supervise the finishing of every show. And because I was his assistant, and in the next year, season 3, Phil Neal came in. Chris moved up to producing. Phil Neal came in, who was a long-standing editor of television. He came in, and I was his assistant. So I helped them finish every show. So in 2 seasons I think it was 33 episodes. And, my cog of the machine was a lot of getting it on the air. And where does it go through editing, but then how it goes out to the composer, to sound and music. And I was at the mixes, the sound mixes, some of the color correction, and get it on the air and try to be on time. But what happened, and I'm sure you've heard this a lot, is that we had brilliant writers, and brilliant performers, as you know, since you appreciate them so. And still, Glenn would rewrite every script. And what happened over the course of each season was we would start with plenty of time, and then things got pushed back for Glenn to rewrite and then go on the air. and he was writing things that that were being shot the same day, which was highly unusual, not as a regular practice anyway. He was he so our schedule pushed closer and closer and closer to our air date on Tuesday night, and pushed so far that, as you know, sometimes we didn't have a show. And there was a point at which Glenn, there were big powwows. Glenn had to say, we're not going to make it this time, and call up ABC and say, we have to do a rerun. And that was always in the back end of the season. And they were not happy about that. But we were for about half the season, we were shooting through Friday, still cutting on Saturday. We would release each reel. Each show was, we were on film. Here's the other thing. Film takes a lot longer, or a lot of steps. It takes a lot longer than digital. So it's very labor intensive. And we were trying to do it with no time. So they'd shoot until Friday, which means that we got new dailies footage on Saturday, sync it up, prep it for editing. Editing would start Saturday afternoon on the newest portion. And, a bunch of us would stay through the weekend, through Sunday, through Monday, into Tuesday. And we would try to be done by Tuesday afternoon, because that was Tuesday night on the East Coast. And there were a couple of times when we got right to the very end, and the show, there was only one copy. It was fresh off the machines, one copy of the show, no backup, no B plan, and going live on the air to the East Coast. Terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And people hadn't heard of anything like that. Just not heard anything like that. I was because I was helping to finish all the shows, I was almost always the one who got the material together. I was often so tired that I was truly afraid of, I had nighttime dreams that I had gotten the reels out of order. And though there were people who were, who came behind me to double check that we didn't do that. And so then I was the one who measured the show, found out how long we were, and so did we have to, if we were too long, they had to cut something, figure it out, what could they cut. And sometimes we were within a certain parameter where we could adjust the speed of the film to tape, the final film to tape, by a little bit, but not very much. Otherwise, the dialogue would sound like the Chipmunks, or it'd sound like, some basso profundo. And also the rule was, because they were buying such amazing original songs, the really most famous versions, that we never changed the speed of the songs. They were classic. Everybody knew them. We never changed the length of the song. So figuring out how long the show was included, we have to keep these song sections exactly the way they are. And then, of course, sometimes we were short by a minute or two or three. And if it was not too much, then we could put another establishing shot of another little transition of Los Angeles. But sometimes it was 2 or 3 minutes short, and that's where the cold opens began. Glenn then, I would find this out, I don't know, 2, 3 in the morning, Saturday night to Sunday morning, and call and let everybody know as soon as I knew. And then they would make a plan, and Glenn would write it on Sunday and scramble to come up with a cool idea that only took only needed one camera, one angle, that it could stay interesting and fun, and but it was one camera, so it didn't need any editing, and that and it would be written to the size of the hole that we had. So they were answering mail. They were, I'll never forget when the Temptations came. That was amazing, amazing. And they spoke to each other as David and Maddie. They spoke to each other in character, but characters who were making a TV show, right? So the other, another of many cool things was breaking the fourth wall, looking at camera and talking to the audience, which was it was an old technique, but most people didn't do it because they didn't want to take you out of the story of what was going on with David and Maddie. But it was quite an art, and especially from the acting point of view, it was really an art to be in character in the middle of the action of the story and then turn and just as easily and often really off the cuff, sounds like it's off the cuff, turn to the audience, talk to the audience, and then turn back. And so the cold opens were all made that way. David thought Maddie didn't dance very well, and so, he wanted to teach her to dance, and so the Temptations popped up, the actual Temptations, because we don't lie. And then they did a little dance number and popped on and off. And it was hysterical. And Orson Welles introduced the black and white show. Again, the name of the show. You guys know the name of the show. And we had the dream sequence always rings twice. And the reason to bring in Orson Welles was they were terrified that people would think their televisions were broken and they'd turn off the show, or that they were watching the wrong thing, and So so it was Glenn's idea to bring in Orson Welles for a cold open, and there's nothing wrong with your television set, and that was amazing because he died a week later, so that was the very last thing that he did, and we're all deep, deep film fans, and to have those people, to have Stanley Donen come in and direct the dance sequence for see, I don't remember the names of the shows. And Stanley Donen came in and directed just the dance sequences, and Sandal Bergman was a very famous Broadway dancer, which then Bruce and Cybill were terrified. Oh yes, thank you, Big Man on Mulberry Street. Bruce and Cybill were like, we've got to keep up with these people who have been expert at this for decades, and we're trying to keep up. That was such a fun show. I mean, they all were. They were so surprising and unusual, and the mystery really didn't matter. It was all about the two of them, right? I mean, I remember when Chris Welch, who hired me, was on from the pilot on sound, and then on picture for the first 5. It was a mid-season replacement, and it wasn't getting traction at the beginning. It was not getting traction in the first season. And I don't know that people really got it. And I didn't see the pilot live because I was working on something else. And so the first episode that I saw was Gunfight at the So-So Corral. And I had seen so many hitman shows, so many spy shows, really fun, so cool. And it just blew me away. It just blew me away. No one had ever twisted that kind of a story in that kind of a way. So I was just over the moon that Chris called me to come for the next season. But there were special guests. There were guests who were asking to be on the show. Big stars, as you know, who were lining up. Can I be on Moonlighting? Can I play Miss Pesto's mom? Can I play Maddie's mom? Whoopi Goldberg was like, I want to be on your show. And so in the second season, it sort of then came from, and maybe people had seen the reruns in the summer, but it started sort of quietly and then absolutely exploded. It just exploded. It was, I've never seen anything like it. And it eventually was in the top 10 within that same season. And, I would be in the mix where they would go back and forth over the dialogue. They would be mixing the dialogue with the music and the sound effects, back and forth, painstakingly make it sound beautiful. And I would hear it back and forth in the editing room and in the mix. And then I would go see somebody on Wednesday, the day after, and they were quoting whole lines and paragraphs back to me. It was unbelievable. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was appointment viewing. You know, whole colleges were getting together in their common room for everybody to watch Moonlighting together. And it was all everybody was talking about at the water cooler on Wednesday morning. And people could tape it, but they wanted to watch it live because everybody was talking about it. And in season 2, there were the show, different people on the show, and the show itself got 16 Emmy nominations. And the shock was that the one nomination, or the one Emmy that we won, was for editing, and in season 2 and season 3. So they had already gone to the Golden Globes, and they won other things as well, but it got the show got a reputation for being really hard and right up to the last minute. And after I went on to other shows, people kept hiring me for the really tough shows. Like, oh, she did Moonlighting, she could do anything. She did Moonlighting, she doesn't need to sleep. So yeah, I mean, and we got to a place where, I mean, there were weeks that were kind of normal, which was 60 hours, 70 hours. And then the weeks that we were finishing were, you know, almost always 80, 90, 100. On Atomic Shakespeare, I worked the longest week I've ever had in my whole career, which was 125 hours in 7 days. And I figured out that that if you worked 24 hours a day for 5 days in a row, that was 120 hours. And, but, you know, I had 2 extra days. But I think it was the toughest show anybody did, because it was completely different. It shot at Universal instead of at Fox because they needed the sets. The sets were built. But then they had a set that they turned the Bluemoon Detective Agency office into a room at the castle, right? So that was completely new. All the costumes were new. All the hair and makeup was new. And it was in iambic pentameter, for God's sake. You know, impossible to learn at the last minute. And that show not only went, the show that went on before that was Big Man on Mulberry Street, which was a big, tough show with a big dance sequence in it. The next show was Atomic Shakespeare, that was all period, iambic pentameter. And that one shot all day Saturday. And Saturday was the big dance, Good Lovin', in the chapel. And there were 8 cameras at a time. And so we didn't get that footage. We were getting that footage prepped, synced, prepared for editing all day Saturday. And the editors jumped in too, that not just the assistants, the editors, everybody was syncing dailies. And syncing them in a way that, because it's film, it's much more complicated, that you would have all these, it was like a music video. You'd have all these pictures to the one track. And and live live tracks as well, where, you know, he did little bits in between. So yeah, by the time, I mean, we were regularly dating the beginnings and ends of our days. You know, and we called it bop till you drop. And, you know, we would trade off. I'm a night person, so I was almost always overnight, and sometimes more. We also answered our phone in post as Moonlighting, we never close. And the other people who were working, we were working in the editing building at Fox, which was across the street, inside the studio, across the street from the production office, and just across the other way to the one and then two studios that we had. So we were very close together, but we had no time to, you know, go on set. We really did not. So we were in this building that had all the editors of all the Fox shows that were going. And on the second floor, it looked like they called it the Big Blue Boat because it was blue, it was big. And it had theaters on the first floor, editing rooms on the second floor, and it had a big balcony all the way around the outside. And because it was film, and it had floor-to-ceiling, wall-to-wall windows. So it looked like a big cruise ship. And all the windows were painted black so that the rooms would be dark enough. So the other people editing big shows, big complicated shows at Fox, would leave at about the time we were having lunch. And, you know, and we'd make all these jokes about how, you know, oh, so you got half a day. Okay, all right, well, we're just getting rolling. So yeah, they, I mean, it was not at all unusual for, Glenn was in the editing room when he wasn't writing. He was in the editing room and, or screening on the first floor. And Jay Daniel would come into editing and sit on the couch and start nodding off. Like everybody was nodding off. And at the end of Atomic Shakespeare, I remember I was in the editing rooms. I think Chris Welch was at the mix. And I was talking to him about, you know, explaining something that we had just done or what we had accomplished and what we were still working on. And I fell asleep in the middle of my own sentence. So I woke up. He was going, Jewel, Jewel, Jewel. Like, oh, right. Where was I? We were in danger of falling asleep in our cars going home. I did, but I was always at a red light with my foot on the brake. Or I would wake up and the light would be green, and I had no idea how long I had missed. So, but they offered us hotel rooms, but I always wanted to go home and change my clothes and, you know, come back again. So on Atomic Shakespeare, I worked like 24 hours and then had 5 hours off, went home, got some food, changed, took a shower, and drove back. And, 24 hours working, 5 hours off, 26 hours working. It just literally was around and around and around till we were done. And I did talk about live on air. That didn't happen very often. But the other thing that happened was in the back half of the seasons. We would every episode had every editor working on it. There was one editor who was supposed to be the lead editor, but invariably they would dole out scenes and then put them together in reels, and then, do the notes for Glenn and ABC and whomever, and so every editor worked on every show, and every assistant worked on every show. What was I going to say about that? I don't know. We were working on moviolas. I don't know if you know what those are, but they're the upright film systems. There were experiments in digital editing by the first one by George Lucas, but it wasn't working yet. So in another few years, I was very early on digital editing, and which then popped me up to some big studio features, big ones, that were really fun, and a lot of them really hard. Oh, I know what I was going to tell you is the editors had were working on the shows, and we would deliver the reels in whatever order. They weren't in order. It was whatever was finished. Is reel 3 finished? And let's go. And we'll send it to there was a whole system of making copies and dupes, and we'll send it to the composer, we'll send it to the music editor, we'll send it to the sound editors, a bunch of copies, and to Alf Clausen, who was the composer, and often when we were locking the first reel or two and shooting was still going on, even if it was like Thursday or even Friday, we didn't know who the bad guy was. The editors didn't know because Glenn hadn't decided. And they were cutting the shows. People used to say, it was so amazing how there were 3 different people I thought could be the bad guy, and I just didn't know. It's like, well, that's because each character, each villain or potential villain, was introduced as though they might actually be the bad guy because Glenn hadn't decided. So, half the show would have been locked and out to the composer and all these people, and they were finishing it. And we're like, so, have they decided who it's Thursday? Have they decided who's the bad guy? And we just, we just had to laugh. We had a symphony, which was called a half symphony, a half orchestra, that was there was not very much synthesized music back then, so there there were actual players to make real music, and an amazing woman, female singer, coloratura. She did all that great sort of sort of background tone. It was so beautiful, and and scoring happened on Friday night in the evening, and they didn't have all the show. So Alf would he would compose to what he had. He would and then there had been an old joke of from the silent era where there's a chase scene, and what about the music? Well, we need 3 yards of chase, 3 yards of music track for the chase, and that's effectively what he was doing. He was guessing how long the scene was going to be, and and then and he would write it. He would adjust the music for the reels that were locked and complete. And then he took all the scores, symphony scores, and handed them out to all the players, this half an orchestra. And the beginning of every scoring session was, okay, reel one, you play through to bar 127, and then go back to 113, and then we'll go through to 145, and then skip 146 to 167, and go straight to this other part. And there was this whole, for every reel, there was this whole description of how he had figured out to make the music fit so that they could record it to the picture, which is what you're always supposed to do. That's what everybody does. And then we had a music editor who was so fabulous and so sweet and so put upon, as were our sound editors, that he then took all the rest of the music, including anything that had been composed for earlier episodes, and fit it together piece by piece. Now we've got a love scene. Now we've got a chase scene. Now we've got the villain. Now we've got, and he would have all this different music from that episode and from the other episodes. And he pieced it together in sync to what it turned out to be. It was just like, what? Kids, don't do this at home. So, it was a brilliant team from beginning to end, and everyone's so excited to be there and so exhausted. There are plenty of other shows that I've done that are really, really tough. And there are plenty of people who are really, really difficult to work with. And that did not include this crew, really. Just brilliant, everybody. And just crazy, full speed, but doing it so smartly, and keeping the tone and the intention of the story and of the characters and what Glenn was asking for. It truly was remarkable. It truly was remarkable. So anyway, now also there was some, as you've heard, there came to be talk about how difficult Cybill was. And honestly, I mean, she was, they weren't working quite the hours that we did, but she had her daughter Clementine at home, who was maybe 5 or 6 at that point. And they had to look really great. We didn't have to look great. There was one assistant editor who we loved, and every time we had to come in on a Saturday or a Sunday, she would show up in her jammies with the footies and walk in her footy jammies with a coat on top. And it was her silent protest that this should be a time that I'm at home asleep. And she brought other clothes and she would change at lunch. But, you know, there were a few little nudges like that. Like, really? Really? But, I mean, there were many times when Cybill would be so tired she'd get bronchitis. And, you know, I mean, you could tell they were just, everyone just sort of at the ragged edge. And that when they had to fight in the show, in the story, they kind of worked up to that in a way, and they'd start fighting on set. She never threw anything at Glenn, which got in the trades. And, you know, National Enquirer was all over, you know. So, yes, she did throw a briefcase, but she threw it at the wall. And there was an editor who used to he'd get so frustrated, he would throw a synchronizer at the wall, never at a person. And a synchronizer has a big lead bottom and a sharp razor top. And so he would throw it at the wall. And we then had to take it down to the equipment room. I don't know what happened, but yeah, it's out of alignment now, and so we'll need to have another synchronizer. And we had to keep replacing them. So no one was hurt, but yeah, it was. But everyone was tired. So because there was this, you know, started to be this backlash against Cybill, and there were not very many women on the show in any department. But that was just par for the course at that time. I mean, I went to AFI in cinematography, and I was the only woman in the cinematography department at that time in my class. So that's just, I mean, I remember going to the lab, getting a tour of the film lab to see how they developed the film. And, you know, 3 city blocks. And I asked for the ladies' room, and they're like, oh no, we don't have a ladies' room in this building. You can go the next block over where the secretaries are, and there's a bathroom for women there. So one of my buddies guarded the door, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to miss the tour. I'm going to go here right now, and somebody guard the door, and yeah. So that was just the way it was, you know. It was mid-'80s in Hollywood. And so there started to be there was backlash against Cybill and and among the women on the show, and the men too, there was, a feeling that it should be a little more even, a little more parity. That Bruce just exploded out of nowhere, and he and Glenn were a mind meld. His character was the guy that Glenn had always wanted to be, and we got that. They were so in sync. It was amazing, and but in any comedy, there is a straight person, and the comedic one. So that's part of the contrast, and part of the part of how you keep the drama going and the comedy going is because of the characters not getting along. One wants this, one wants that, and they don't get along. And that's how drama is written, right? So, and I've been on other shows where this is the case, where the woman is the straight man, and there is an issue of like, I'm not getting any funny lines. I want to be funny. I want to, and Cybill had waited forever to be in a comedy. And so there was that. And we also had, I think it was Bride of Tupperman, had a scene with models. And the models were, lining the hallway, waiting to audition with Reuben Cannon, the casting director, who was also amazing. And, on one hand, it's like 20 virtually identical looking, tall, thin women with long blonde hair. And, and then there'd be another really sexy woman, in an episode, and another. So, and the women on the show, working on the show, and it may have started with the writers, the women started saying, like, okay, so you're casting and writing all these hot babes, so isn't there anybody hot, sexy for Maddie to get excited about, And that eventually they heard, they wrote in a character, brought in some like bodybuilder guy. We were like, no, that's not what we meant. And then by the end of that season, there was Sam. We're like, oh yeah, okay. And the women of Moonlighting, again, I think it was, it was, we were talking back about the stories, about what, like, how about, giving her more to do? How about, how about cutting back on the sexism just a little bit, and it could still be funny. It's not that we don't have a sense of humor, and so I think it was the women writers. I think it was Deborah Frank, and there were two other women writers who decided that what the ladies on the crew needed was a girls' all-nighter, a girls' sleepover, and decided to create the Moonlighting Madness Marathon that started one Friday night and went through halfway through the next day. And it was completely a secret. They had booked it. They had figured it out. They weren't telling anybody what was going to happen. They brought hats. Can you see this? Moonlighting Madness Marathon, 86. That was in the spring of 86. And as it turned out, they had booked a huge suite at a boutique hotel in West Hollywood. And we stayed there most of the time, but they had booked a masseuse, they had booked a chiropractor. Yes, we had the sexy stripper fireman come in. There was a troupe that did a mystery, mystery train kind of a thing that they were acting out. Who was the villain, and they hadn't gotten finished when our female writers were like, it was that one, and they were like, wait, but we're not done yet. And they said, yeah, we wrote that episode already. It's going to be on next week. So they were way ahead of the mystery train. And then, and we talked and had a blast, and, saw all the women from all the other departments, and ended up going to Malibu and having breakfast on the beach. And it was fabulous. Moonlighting Madness Marathon. Girls' night out. But that also, that pushback about Bruce, David, getting the cool stuff to do, then resulted in this episode. Part of it resulted in, like, let's find out more about Maddie. Let's find out more about her. Let's give her more to do. And I remember reading the script and being like, oh my God, here we go. This is, it has its funny moments, but so highly dramatic. And that David was written to be so very supportive and careful of her when she was hurting so much. And so I'm sure you've all seen it already, and we're going to watch it again. The scene after it was the brilliant scene, silent for minutes at a time, where he's following Maddie's father, and then comes back, and she's there waiting to hear what happened. And he can't really bring himself to say. And her scene with Eva Marie Saint as her mom, who broke down so early. It was the first scene, I think. It was just, I just thought it was tremendous. It was tremendous. And it was, on one hand, so out of character for so many things that the show had done, but it was also completely in character for how their characters had been built and how they treated each other and how they went between comedy and drama. One of the really extraordinary things was it could be everything. It could swing from one extreme to the next. And it all fit. It was written so well, in such a complex, layered way, each of these characters and the stories, that anything would fit. David comes back from summer vacation, and how low can you go? And they're slamming doors. Fine, good. The doors kept breaking. And but the show could go in any direction that you wanted to take it. It was it was incredible. It was incredible. So so it was weird that I hardly ever was on set. I was on set for the Christmas show, which was just so sweet. And we were allowed to bring family. They wanted people to bring their kids, to like the families who were supporting Moonlighting, because life at home was often very tough. There were some divorces, because nobody was home, and so it was a thank you not only to the crew but to the families of the crew or the significant others of the crew. And I remember I wore a new sweater that I had gotten that I was so excited about, that was mohair, and down came the plastic snow, and we sang the song many, many times so that we could sing it all together. And then they got close-ups of, and there were multiple cameras, and I was picking out plastic snow out of my sweater for months afterwards. But it was just really so lovely. It was really so lovely. I mean, they were hearing what we were saying, and It's a Wonderful Job was, could have been verbatim of what people were saying. And we're like, we're still here, but, could we have Christmas off? Please, 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 could we have Christmas off? And the one time they figured that out, they were like, "Oh, this is gonna be great. We figured out how we can send people home for Christmas break," and it was the straight poop. It was Rona Barrett investigating what's going on behind the scenes, and it was what we call a clip show. It was clips from earlier shows, so editing and assistant editing was still working just as hard as every other show. We pulled all the film out of the vault. It was lining the hallways, and they would come up with they decided which scenes to write around, and then we had to remember which episode that was and which reel of which episode, go hunting for all the clips. But it was really funny. I mean, Rona Barrett really was like a real sort of gossip queen. She was taken seriously, but that really was her job that she did. And then, she made them kiss, so that was great. The kiss in the garage, that episode was amazing. And so, I mean, so much funny stuff. So much funny stuff. So, but I have to say, after Atomic Shakespeare, I decided we had multiple episodes until the end of the season, and I decided I was going to go, but I would finish the season that I promised. And I went off I got a feature film that was shooting in Stowe, Vermont, with Don Johnson and oh my God, who was it? I don't know, can't remember. And we were working sort of regular hours, so we were doing 50 to 60 hours a week. And then I'm looking around like, what do people do when they have 40 extra hours of free time every week? What do we do? And I'm like, and I'm in my condo looking at the mountains of Stowe, where the Sound of Music family lived, And like, oh my God, oh my God. Okay, we could do something besides working and sleeping and eating. But they did everything they could to, you know, to make us as happy as they could manage. I mean, another thing that I did, because I was working on the ends of the shows, is I would corral all the people who were working over the weekend through Monday, and we paid for the film studio to be open around the clock on the weekend, and always saying that we didn't know when we'd be ready. We didn't know when the first reel would be done. We didn't know when the last reel would be done, and that was part of the gig. And for music editing, for sound editing, we didn't know. You know, we thought we were pushed. They were really pushed, and so I was sending drivers around to the lab and to make dupes, which were black and white film copies of the cut reel. And again, on film, we would be cutting a film print. The editors would cut the print of the film, not the negative until the show was locked. But there was only one copy of the dailies for each scene. And when a show was cut, there was only one edited print that was spliced together with tape, and you could take it apart, put it back a different way. And that, you know, there was one. There was no copy. And one of the times that was terrifying was we were delivering, I don't know, the third reel out of 5. And I handed it to the driver, who was one of the regular guys, and he went down to his car, and 45 minutes later he called me. And this was all, we didn't have any cell phones. This was the olden days. He called me and said, I don't know how to tell you this, but I can't find the reel. I looked everywhere. I looked in my car. I looked in the back seat. I looked under the seats. I looked in the trunk. I looked everywhere. Is it there? Did I leave it there? And I'm like, I handed it to you. It's not here, but we'll look. And all of the assistants went looking, hunting for the reel. And you know, and again, this is 2 a.m, Saturday night. We're on the air on Tuesday. And 1/5 of our show is missing, the only copy. And I remember I went to other people in the building, the security guards. Have you seen anything? I went to the front gate at Fox. We're looking for this thing. Have you seen anything? No, we haven't seen anything. Well, if you see something, could you let me know? And this is where we are. And it was terrifying. It was terrifying. And then in another hour and a half, the guy from the gate called up and said, I have it. I have it. Somebody found it in the middle of the street on Pico Boulevard, in the middle of the night where traffic was going, right? That was some unhoused person. And I had visions that it had like unrolled down the boulevard. I had many dreams about that coming up in my future. And this guy found it on the street, blocks away, and said, well, it's a film. Oh, and this is Fox Studio. Maybe it's for them. And took it to the guard, who got it back to us. And we then cleaned it carefully. And we were back on. Didn't have to do a rerun that day. And, you know, it's not that things don't happen. It's that you just have to keep rolling with it and find a solution. But the solution of reprinting all those scenes and recutting them would have taken days and days and days, that we didn't have. So, and obviously the thing was he had the film reel in the box, labeled. He had his Coke. He put the box on the roof. He put the Coke in the car, and he drove away because he was just as tired as everybody else. So, bless his heart. So we lost a big chunk of show that day. That was exciting that night. I don't know. Have we talked enough? Man, oh man, oh man. I haven't been reading this because Club Joe. So I haven't been reading this because I have to pull my glasses down, as you see. Does anybody want to ask something? So the upshot is, as hard as it was and as crazy as it was unforgettable. It was unforgettable. And so brilliant, even under those conditions. It was just astonishing. And I've been looking for a show like that ever since. So, I'd love to do another. Oh, so what is this? The Party? Oh, yes. So I have a couple of short stories about our parties, which were amazing. And the crew gifts were fabulous. So I have a bunch of those. I actually have 2 jackets, one of which I would like to sell. Just putting it out there. But we would have a big Christmas party, and we'd have a big end of the season wrap party. And I remember going. Now, Cybill, because Clementine was so young, Cybill would dress up, and she'd dress up Clementine, and they'd come together. And they'd stay for a while and talk to everybody. But she was not going to stay all night. She was going to take her daughter home, as she should, perfectly appropriate. Bruce was single. So he danced with all the ladies, which was super fun. He was so sweet. It was his big break. It was his big break. And he was just sort of like, oh my God. Like there's a line that I love from broadcast news where he goes to the correspondence dinner, and everybody's dressed to the nines. And we were very punk at that time, so was a little different. Wasn't elegant Hollywood. It was like cool Hollywood. So our hero comes in, and his date, our other hero, comes in. And he goes to her, he rushes to her and says, "Do you know who's here?" And she says, "No." And he says, "Me." So that's how I felt And that's how Bruce felt. Like, what? Look at this. Look at this. And we're part of it. And we're invited. And we're allowed. And later, when the show got more and more popular, there were a lot of people, a lot of really famous people, some of whom may have been invited, but a lot of them, I think, crashed. And I remember looking around like, well, this is not their party. But I was like, well, let's, it's not up to me who gets invited. Let's share it all. Let's have a blast. And you know what? We, the crew, the actors, we belong here. We earned it. This is our party. This is our show. And they're just visiting. And it's not the same. But yeah, Bruce was, later Bruce got a reputation, which is the case with practically everybody who gets such quick fame, huge fame so quickly. And Nakatomi Plaza is at the back of Fox Studios. It's right there, so we could see it every day. And it was still being built for the first time. But in those days, he was so sweet and so kind. They were both so kind to everyone, and tempers were frayed because we were just exhausted. Everybody, and doing our best to hang on for each other and support each other, which was great. And so, yeah, the parties were a blast. The parties would go all night. It was really fun. So anyway, I don't know what else. What else did I not mention that we talked about? Oh, did you edit the "I love you" scene in The Big Bang? I remember that because I was on the mix stage when that happened. And I don't remember a conversation there, but I do remember that he said it. And I'm not sure who decided. I think it was decided in advance of the mix that the music would swell there. But I don't know the reason for that, other than trying to keep people hanging on for that relationship, and the up and down of drama of the relationship was so crucial. So the last episode I worked on was when they got together. I Am Curious, Maddie. Which was amazing. And also they had the kiss in the garage, but the first kiss was in is somebody telling me? I think it was the Black and White show. Was the first time they kissed, but they weren't David and Maddie, so that didn't count. That was just a fantasy kiss. That wasn't a real kiss. It was hot, but it was a real kiss. So yeah, when was the last time I saw? Well, I saw this episode a few days ago, and that was the first time since it aired. My MO was I was almost always on Tuesday, working on Tuesday, and up until the point where everything had been delivered, they were rushing for the end, and then I would go home and I'd watch the show live. And I was recording it on VHS, but I wanted to watch it live. And partly, like, please God, I didn't get the reels out of order. I didn't put a scene in the wrong place. So I'd watch it live, and then I'd sleep, and then Wednesday would be my day off. And I'd, like, sleep all day Wednesday. and then back to work Thursday morning. Other than Atomic Shakespeare, where we just kept on going. So I haven't seen this. I mean, what I really would like to do is watch the whole thing from the beginning. And I was hoping I could watch the whole thing from the beginning before talking to you guys, but I've been really busy. But it's so fun to remember it, and it's so fun to see Neil and Deborah and Alan, and I would love to have a Moonlighting reunion with everybody we can corral up. I mean, it was just we were really, really tight for that time, and then moving on. So let's see, what are people asking? What do you think of being on streaming now? Oh, well, here's the thing about there are two big things about not having reruns after the seasons, would rerun in the summertime. But the first reason is, at that time, that was more stringent and structured. Shows were doing 20-ish episodes a season. All the shows did that. And after 5 seasons, you had 100 shows, and then you could go into syndication with 100 shows. So Moonlighting never got there. It didn't have the requisite number of shows. And so that held up having, for decades, having Moonlighting available. And I understand you guys made it possible, banged on the door to get the DVDs and the DVD extras, and which was great because it happened later and things had cooled down, and that was good. And then the next thing was the songs, because they were so expensive. And they were so expensive at the time that they only bought for a handful of screenings, as opposed to, like if you're making a feature film, you would buy all the music in perpetuity. They call it in perpetuity throughout the universe, is in the contract. And that way you own it. It's, you've bought it, you've paid for it, you own it, you can play it as many times as you want and sell it as many times as you want. And so those songs were a fortune. ABC was throwing money at the show. The Moonlighting was more expensive than any other show on the air at the time. And then Atomic Shakespeare was double that. Unheard of at the time. And ABC just kept throwing money. They didn't care if we were doing overtime. We went from regular time to time and a half to double time, and then quad time, where we made 4 times per hour. So yeah, the extra 40 hours was 40 hours of quad time. It cost them a fortune. Everybody was on scale because we were already making so much money. So yeah, and then recreating, getting the rights to those songs again. And a certain number of those musicians were older or had died, or you'd have to go through the estate. And so some of the songs had to be replaced, which is so sad. They were so carefully chosen. But it was part of making it exactly what Glenn had in his mind. So that's why it took so long. And also, everyone's so sad that Bruce is not well. And that then sped up, we need to do it now. They said, I wasn't part of that. But they said, we've got to have these episodes out. And so he can see them back if he wants to. And they got the Hulu deal, and then they got the deal to sell. You could rent or buy episodes on a bunch of different streamers. So I love that. I just love that. And I'm glad people are seeing it. I'm glad that, I hear stories from you guys that you were kids. And, we were grown-ups. We got all the triple entendre. We got all of that. But to have new generations find it and appreciate it and think it's just as fun as we did, that's amazing. And it's Bruce's birthday. He is 69 years old today. And what I really wanted to do was play the clip from, and again, I can't remember the name of the show, where he sang Happy Birthday to Maddie. He sang the Beatles' birthday song to Maddie. So you can pull that up on YouTube and sing along for Bruce, who we love, and his family, who we love, and Cybill as well, when her birthday comes around next. So let's see. Are people saying things? I have to read. Bloopers during the credits. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure there were bloopers with bad language. And that couldn't go on the air. In fact, one of the things that Glenn really wanted to do, one of the jokes, he wanted to have a running joke about private investigators, and the slang for them were private dicks, and he wanted to do a whole private dick thread of jokes, and standards and practices would not allow that. Not back then. So that's too bad. We lost all the private dick jokes. But he made a regular point of writing a joke that was so outrageous that they'd get so upset about it, and it would make the other ones look not so bad. So he would regularly, for every episode, write in a joke that he knew wasn't going to go, and we'd cut it out and slide the other ones in. And he also said that he would laugh really loudly and try to, so that hopefully they would hear the joke. So that's an old Hollywood trick. Or cough when something comes up that you don't want standards and practices to see, or that that somebody's going to object to, and try to take their attention so they don't hear it. So let's see. Marlena's will be the last question, so we can start the live. Yeah. Did I answer Marlena's? Oh, that was about bloopers. Oh, maybe I can come after we watch. Oh, yeah, sure. I'd love to come back. I'd love to come back. And if I watch all the episodes, I'll remember more. It was extraordinary. It was extraordinary, and I'm so glad that you guys all found it sooner or later, back then, now, whenever, on Hulu. I'm glad you found it and appreciate it. That's wonderful. So, are we going to watch the show? Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. I'm going to watch the show with you, because I want to see your comments. So, do I turn this off now? Diana, do I turn it off? Bye and hugs. Bye and hugs from Diana to me, from me to all of you. Okay, bye.